So good morning, everybody. We're going to start the session. Thank you very much for finding us in the first place, up all of those stairs and across corridors and what have you. Well done for your resilience, and I'm very pleased to see you here this morning. So my name is Duncan Spencer. I'm the Head of Advice and Practice at the Institution of Occupational Safety and Health, and my colleague.
My name is Ulrike Bollmann, and I'm President of the European Network Education and Training in Occupational Safety and Health.
So this morning we've got 5 speakers for you to talk about the influence of global change on individual capability in the modern workplace. So one of the things that is really interesting in debate at the moment is about how the world is changing around us. You know, it is accelerating, it is very dynamic, it's very unpredictable. In fact, people talk about the volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world that we all have to navigate these days. So what we're going to do is we're going to examine in these sessions 2 of the drivers for that change, one being climate change and the second one being technological advancement. But both of those drivers, of course, are affecting change in such ways that the consequences are that many cultures are finding their ethics are being challenged as a result of that. So we couldn't actually have a session that was complete without thinking a little bit about what the consequences are of those changes too. So, you know, we live in a world where temperatures and catastrophic climate events are becoming more frequent. We live in a world that technological advancement is happening so fast, so quickly, that it's difficult for anybody, even people focused in that industry, to keep up with it. We have the global domination of the internet, and we have the rising influence of social media across many, many different societies, which is challenging the cultural norms of many organizations, many societies across the globe. It's affecting our views on religion and custom and the histories of different countries that shape the peoples as they are. So what we are left with as a result of that is that we must shift our focus to acquiring the specific skills for working in this new world. You know, we have to adapt our competencies, and the field of occupational safety and health is no different to that. You know, we have to be flexible. We have to have some kind of lifelong adaptability, so we keep learning over time as we get older. And above all, perhaps, we need that element of critical thinking. We need to challenge the norm because the norm is changing so quickly. And then we have to make those ethical judgments within the framework of that. So in this session, we will have, we'll break into 3 parts, actually. The first part being with 2 speakers, the second part with 3 speakers, and the third part is your opportunity to join in that discussion. So, Ulrike.
We have 2 moderators for this session, and a very important person in the background, our rapporteur. He will give reports, summaries to the plenary of the World Assembly. Therefore, be aware of the fact everything that you will contribute here will be picked up by Chris Davis immediately and presented to a bigger audience on Friday, if I'm correct. And you are the principal thinker of IOSH, therefore a very important person. We have, 2 parts of this workshop. After this opening now, we will have a speaker session, and we will have a second part after the break. It's more a kind of interactive workshop. In the speaker session, you will have the pleasure to listen to 2 very exciting keynote presentations. But after that, it will become much more exciting again, because we will focus on our 3 core topics: the digitalization, the climate issue, environmental issue, and on the top, the ethical challenges for all of us today. therefore 2 keynote presentations, 3 thematic presentations. We will have a short break, and please come back, because after that we have prepared something special for you. You will work on decisive questions, mostly formulated by Duncan, my colleague, and you will give us your ideas, your thoughts, your impressions, and you will write them down on papers. We will have courses during this interactive session. You will have the opportunity to discuss with each of the colleagues here in the room, but always focused on one of our 3 core topics. And finally, there will be a reflection by our speakers, and a reflection from your side as well, and then the closing. Who are our people?
So our speakers this morning is James Pomeroy, who's a director of a global health and safety company called Arup, and a recognized safety leader. We have Simon Watson, who's the Chief Health, Safety, Security and Environmental Officer at ACWA Power. So those are your first 2 speakers in the first session. In the second session, we have Tim Tregenza, Senior Network Manager from IOSH, and then we have Ahmad Ismael, who is the President of the Malaysian Society for Occupational Safety and Health, and Evelien Jonkeren, who is from ISA. So we have a range of experts for you to talk about these different aspects.
I think we can switch now to our first speaker, James Pomeroy.
So while James is coming up, I'll just do a quick introduction for you. James is the Global Health and Safety and Quality Manager at Arup, which is an international engineering design consultancy. James has been involved in leading safety and risk management programs internationally for 30 years. He has first-hand experience of managing environment, health and safety in a variety of hazard sectors, including marine, oil and gas, aerospace and manufacturing. James has a particular interest in using technology to improve safety outcomes, and he has degrees in sustainable business, international environmental law, and safety and risk management, and is a fellow of IOSH and a fellow of IEMA. Is there no end to your skills, James? Over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Ulrike and Duncan. It's a very warm welcome, and thank you very much for deciding to join this session. It's my pleasure today to present to you the report that Arup wrote on behalf of IOSH. And what I'd like to do is to take you through some of the headlines of that report. You can find the report if you look at the QR code. You'll be able to then download a copy of the report and access it. And IOSH have a great website where you'll be able to read all of the report and access all of the information there. The report contains a series of provocative statements, questions really, that make us think differently. And so the aim of these provocative statements is to challenge our current thinking, how we're viewing safety. And I'll explore each of those over the next few minutes. So examples of some of those are, what if we started to regulate health in an identical way to the way that we have managed physical safety for the last 150 years? Or what if an employer knew more about the health of an employee than they themselves knew? Now, these are really challenging issues, but they are very real issues that we have to face now, as Duncan set out early on. Now, it's important to say, as Duncan outlined, is that safety does not exist in a vacuum. There are a series of mega challenges or mega trends, however we should describe them, some of which we will explore in a bit more detail. Technology and, of course, data. But, of course, we're facing a demographic change, and we're also seeing big changes in terms of our economies. And that's really shaping the nature of work. So what I'll do is I'll explore a few of these now. If we start with climate, which is the most obvious and pressing issue for us in relation to safety. I often say this phrase, but I think it's important that we never lose sight of it. for most of us, we will experience the climate change as a health and safety issue. So therefore, health and safety, and for those involved, health, safety and well-being, will become centre to our response and also our prevention measures in response to climate change. We are at the forefront of that. What does that mean for the profession? Well, quite significant. The last 12 years have been the hottest on this planet, and we are now facing a challenge whereby our ability to predict how climate change will evolve becomes really challenging for ourselves, our societies, and of course our organizations. There are things that we can do, and we can have awareness of them. So there are some obvious areas for us to think about. The first one is the rise in industrial diseases, things that we had traditionally thought of as occupational exposures, such as malaria, or the rise of kidney exposure if you're exposed to if you're dehydrated. Skin disease and UV will rise as well. So these are what we have traditionally viewed and separated out as being societal or social issues that are now becoming blended. So the first kind of challenge for us is in relation to the merging of occupational and industrial. The second area is more of a skill set for us to think about as a profession, and that is resilience. Building resilience within our workforce and our organizations. What does that mean? Well, we found that within COVID. For many organizations, the first thing they did when COVID struck was throw out their pandemic prepared plans and actually learn to be agile and to respond. So maybe we need to think more about agility as an area within occupational health and safety. And the third area is in relation to modeling. If we cannot predict with great accuracy and plan for that, then how do we use scenario planning as high hazard industries have done for the past 10 years? So there are some challenges that we will explore over the next 3 hours. The second mega challenge is in relation to mental health and well-being. And whilst we won't necessarily explore this in great depth, we need to be cognizant of it. We need to be aware that somewhere between 1 in 4 to 1 in 6 of our workforce will actually experience a mental health episode or will have challenging issues relating to mental health. And this is an area that regulators are responding to. In Australia already, there is regulation for psychosocial risk. Within Europe, we're seeing more regulation of working hours and a separation with the right to disconnect between work and personal life. And of course, if we go back to climate change, many of us and many of our employees will find that really anxious, will find that really problematic, to find that their work, their commute, their lives is being disrupted. So whilst we will explore 2 elements of that, we need to be cognizant that the world is changing and that mental health is an area we need to consider also. So there are things that we can do in this space. We can look at what our role is, how we actually influence that. We can think about how we manage our risk. And well-being is a good example of things that initially we have focused on the prevention, the response. We now need to move upstream to think about how we structure work, how we organize it. And as we did with safety 150 years ago, when the response was to deal with the incidents and to count them and measure them and provide good care, we now need to move further up to the prevention, how we organize work and how we set it up. And finally, there are things that we can use within safety, looking at maturity and measurement and seeing how well that's actually working and taking good feedback. So the first mega trend that we'll explore will be climate. We cannot, of course, ignore mental health and well-being as being another area. So the third area is the future of work. Now, safety is a byproduct. It is something that is affected by the organization of work. And work is fundamentally changing in how it's being structured. We have labor laws and regulation that very much are set for an industrial age, but perhaps not set for a work which is far more peripatetic, where individuals will have 2 or 3 jobs. So the nature of work changes, and we have change within the demographic as well. Really 2 changes on demographic. The first thing just to note is that there's a big shift from a demographic perspective, an aging workforce in the US and Europe, but a much more growing younger workforce within Africa and Southeast Asia. So our supply chains, or if we're operating globally, that gets particularly affected by that. But also those two cohorts have different exposures and different needs. If you are injured as a worker who's over 50, it takes much longer to rehabilitate, and there is a reason why workers over 50 are far more exposed to significant injury and fatality just by the nature of their physical condition. On the other side, we have workers who are much younger, who are inexperienced and don't have tacit knowledge, but they are also the ones who are much more exposed to mental health, and they feel it, and we see it in the data and information that's coming through. So two challenges at two ends of the spectrum. But they also have different needs in terms of learning. We know that the younger generation, in my own organization, we found when we surveyed employees that 62% of our grads who were under the age of 25 said they get 82% of their training from YouTube. Now, what does that do for our formal training when our employees are getting more informal training from online than they are from ourselves? And that's not saying that the internal training isn't good, it's just their preferred way of learning. So then moving then on to the final piece in terms of technology. Technology is fundamentally transforming the nature of work. I was sharing with a couple of colleagues earlier, I spent last week in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong is piloting digital safety management. When you walk on a very large construction site, everything is being monitored in digital. There was one site I went on that had 36,000 IoT devices monitoring everything from worker interaction to vehicles to flooding to air monitoring to UV exposure, everything. So our management systems, which were traditionally very paper-based, we are now having data and information in real time. That's changing the nature of how they organize safety, such that at the end of every day, they are doing stand-downs, a bit like you would do in a military theater, and learning from the data, not waiting for the end of the week or a management review. So the technology is fundamental. And just to give you an idea of the technology, here are 6 areas that I think safety technology could do. You can probably think of 4 or 5 more. The first one is managing safety in complex situations. Most of you have been involved in investigating fatality or major injuries in your time, and you will know how complex actually they are and how it's never one single thing. It's never one root cause. There's a multitude of factors that accumulate together. And this really came true to me when I looked at confined spaces, and I had a series of, unfortunately, worker fatalities in confined spaces, and it went wrong in a space of 36 seconds because so many things happened very, very quickly. The second area is improving work setup. Traditionally, we have done things like risk assessments and SWIMs in a very paper-based system. We're now trying digital rehearsals where we can actually train how we're going to do a task, have workers sit around it, and then look afterwards and then learn how we planned to how it is conducted. Monitoring is key. I gave examples of this Hong Kong site where they're monitoring workers in real time and calling them off when their heat exposure or their heart rate, and actually then calling them to rest periods. So you're starting to see levels. We're also seeing sites with air monitors who are monitoring real-time exposure. So it's not purely the environment, it's also looking at occupational health exposures. And then it enables us to hasten response. I saw one example last week where vehicles entering an area with a restricted height, they were able to identify very quickly before the vehicle went to site and digitally alert the vehicle. So they're very clever areas that we can look at. Now, I'll skip through this and then I'll really summarize then, I think, in the final few minutes that I have, just to 6 areas that I think that we need to think about as a body of safety, an organization. The first area is how we look at digital, how we ensure the transformation and transition through digital, and how we perhaps stop looking necessarily at solely looking at the negatives of something to see the potential. I've certainly changed my mind in terms of how I view digital. The second area is diversity, different views, different perspectives. We are seeking to be more culturally aware and averse, and diversity and inclusion is something that is also has a power to shape safety. Commercial skill sets, I think, is becoming increasingly important, particularly as we start to look at the technology and the costs of that technology. And the final 3 really to think about, complexity. There is not a breakout session or a discussion throughout the next 3 days where, as Duncan said, VUCA, and complexity will not shape that discussion. And of course, sustainability and health. These are two areas. So there's an interdisciplinary nature to what we're going to discuss, where we can't necessarily look at safety in isolation. So I hope over that 10 minutes is giving you thought in terms of framing the discussion and some ideas in terms of where we could, as a profession, as a regulatory body, and a body of practitioners, then think about how we seize the opportunity of these challenges. Thank you very much.
I was going to ask you a question. If you'd like to return to the podium, thank you, James. We've got time just for one question for you. I'm intrigued whether you have any views about the difference between large corporations and small organizations, because in large corporations, in my experience, there's more resource that they can afford to actually buy in specialists and on a full-time basis and so on. But smaller organizations, one-man bands or maybe 2 or 3 people working together is very different. So how do you see the context of what you were talking about? How do we stretch that out down the economic chain to those smaller organizations, do you think?
Yeah, I think we need to be very alert to the idea that the vast majority of workers around the world are working in small and medium-sized organizations. I think implicit in your question is the idea of supply chain and where large organizations can play a role. I think over the last 20 years, we've seen much of this. My challenge to organizations is to make sure they really are seeking to help their suppliers and their small employees, as opposed to burdening them with a lot of systems that may not necessarily work. So I see 2 different types of organizations actually who are responding to this challenge. One who actually holds a hand out and is offering training, support, and offering and sharing their medical and all of their expertise and treating their suppliers as they would their own employees, and others who are putting quite a burden on their supply chain and putting a lot of requirements that may not necessarily be appropriate, or requiring them to have policies and procedures that may not work for them. So I think the challenge is there, and I think you're right to raise the question, and it's how we deal with that.
Thank you very much, James. Once again, please show your appreciation for James Pomeroy. So our next speaker is a gentleman by the name of Simon Watson. As he comes forward, allow me to introduce him. So Simon is the Chief Health and Safety, Security and Environmental Officer at ACWA Power. He is experienced in developing and influencing transformative change programs in complex organizations. Simon's perspective focuses on the current challenges of health and safety competency requirements and gaps across the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, parts of Africa, Central Asia, and China. Simon's experience includes working in critical risk industries with established and emerging markets. Industries, again, such as rail, utilities, mining, oil, gas, heavy engineering, and even customer service-focused organizations. So Simon will reference some of the skills needed when harmonizing safety standards in challenging industries. Simon.
Thank you very much for the very warm welcome, and it makes me feel a little bit older than I probably really am. So appreciate the welcome, and good morning, everybody. As previously said, Simon Watson. I'm the Chief of Health and Safety, Environment and Security for a company called Aqua Power. And so the name's in the title, Aqua Power. We both focus on water, desalination plants, and renewable power mostly, but also some conventional as we go through the energy transition. Now, I know the conference is mostly built around climate change and environmental sustainability, and we're going to be talking a bit about the capability side of that today. But for me, when I think about the capability, what does the future capability of our HSE professionals actually look like? And I want to share some of my experiences of what I think is changing the narrative and where the focus needs to be of the future professional, and how we need to actually focus on making sure we've got the right skills to use the limited time, resources, and expertise available in the profession and in the management to be able to drive the right level of change at the right pace, given that we're now in what we call, obviously, the climate economy. And the climate economy, driven by the energy trilemma, is causing a number of challenges. And I want to put a bit of a play on the energy trilemma and add a 4th element to it, which I'll talk to in a little bit more time. So just a little bit about Aqua Power as my organization I work for. We're one of the largest renewable energy and desalinated water companies, development companies in the world, and we're focused predominantly in the global south, but we are expanding into the east, in Japan, into SIA, into South America, into, well, pretty much everywhere, pretty much where there is work to be done. We don't just own assets, build them, we operate them. We have the full end-to-end cycle, so we have that full risk profile. We can't just hand over that risk. We have to fully own it from end to end of the life cycle. We have over 100 assets in operations. We're producing as much energy, 80 gigawatts, that Turkey we use daily as an organization, and we produce about 4,000 swimming pools of desalinated drinking water in the global south daily as well, and we're increasing that by 100 million cubic meters every year. So we're growing exponentially. The demand in the global south for fresh drinking water and power is there, and the drive for renewable energy is being driven by the global south. So it's certainly a challenge. Now, what we're seeing for us, scale is definitely one of our differentiators, but our ability to control work is our ability to be successful. And controlling work is ultimately what leads us to keeping our people safe in the bigger picture, certainly when we look at the global south economy. So the world talks about the energy trilemma of affordability, sustainability, and reliability. I feel like that's a bit outdated. I feel like there is a fourth point to that, and that point is speed, the pace of speed. And we call that the quadlemma. My CEO, Marco Araceli, talks quite passionately about the pace at which we need to grow to meet our climate change needs. But that causes us a problem. It causes us a problem on balancing. Let's make sure I get the right slides up. Sorry, there we go. That will make more sense. It causes a problem in making sure that we can scale up proportionately. We're building billion-dollar assets across generally unregulated markets. We're mobilizing contractors in the tens of thousands, typically in the weeks, if not a couple of months. We have DFIs and financiers that want world-class standards from day one of launching in countries where there is very little regulatory baseline to start with. So the challenge is real, and the pace is real, and the speed is there. So we've all seen the warning signs. We've got a lot of experience in the room. Scaling too fast without the right systems, without the right capability, without the right people, the cracks start to show. With no clear supervision, no continuity, low levels of ownership is when things start to break down. This isn't just a risk, this becomes a collapse in capability fully. I think the reality for us, the structure, the fragility of the HSE management systems and how we operate on the front line is where it starts to fail. Safety isn't delivered in a PowerPoint that looks nice and easy. Delivering it on the ground is much more difficult in the dirt and where the action really happens. As an example, we've got multinational contractors operating some of the most complex and remote parts of the world, working in environments where regulation is fluid or very little existence. Below that, we've got subcontracting and supply chains 5 layers deep. We often don't have any options of who we can use in these environments. We have no direct line of control, limited oversight, misaligned expectations, 4.5 language barriers, poor attention, overstretched supervision, unqualified supervisors, safety cultures that haven't matured, and you've got a house of cards waiting for the next gust of wind to come along. Compounded with what we would typically say would be a complex HSE management system, 45,001, that makes things difficult to comply with, certainly in the markets and who we're working with. This is what speed does. It compounds the cracks. It shows weaknesses in real time. Commercial pressure, limited governance, high churn, compliance models built for NEEG organization charts don't necessarily work in real life. PowerPoint to power plant, as we say, are two very different things. So if we're honest, we've made mistakes, and we've made quite a few of them, and some of them have been very painful. We've had to learn fast, and with the growth of the organization, if we haven't learned, we'll be left behind, and be left behind as a profession, and we have to keep up. We've learned that oversight without control is just noise. Accountability without consequence is just fragile. And control isn't just inspection, it becomes the most important thing you have, and that's leverage. And we've seen leverage is where things actually start to change. The big shift came for us when we embedded safety into the commercial fabric of how we want to work, and not just focused at the execution phase. This needs to be followed through with hardline levels of accountability, both internally, the supply chain, and with the profession. We've rewired our standards, our occupational standard, to be critical and clear and focused on what really matters, and not just 1 or 2 pages about compliance with a safety management system and reference to some legislation. On the screen, you'll see some examples of what we've done that brought this to life. We've embedded these management systems, our operational safety management systems, our standards. They're tied directly to our EPC milestone payments. The focus isn't about financially penalizing people when things go wrong. The focus is about sharpening the mind on what's important early on, so we get early focus and early drive on key issues. So we've linked performance payments to construction milestones that focus on critical risk management. How are we measuring the presence of controls and making sure that's linked to performance, not when things go wrong? We've added the milestone payment process to standards, which always cause us issues at the start of major projects. So worker welfare conditions, hospitals, medical clinics, ambulance standards, qualified professionals on site at the right time. These are the areas that we see consistently fail and consistently cause us problems, whether it's with our regulators, the financiers, and so on. When we're looking at our training facilities and our health and safety training, we've removed from PowerPoint training, we've gone to experiential learning. What we don't want to do is show people what a blind spot looks like on a PowerPoint. We sit people in the vehicles and we show them. We show the drivers what it's like to be a worker, and we show a worker what it's like to be a driver, so they get to experience firsthand. We show them how to use power tools. We go back to basics, and that gets people to really experience. So that's an induction, not a PowerPoint. There are elements of accountability that get held if you miss a milestone payment or you miss a milestone compliance. We will hold a percentage, we will hold people accountable. And what we found is when you do this 1 or 2 times, very, very quickly, it spreads throughout the organization, the supply chain, and people realize that you're serious about these key focus areas. The key messaging here is the safety management system does work, but where you spend your time and effort and focus becomes really critical. And what we're saying is focus on the really important things and focus on what saves lives. So TOIFR and LTIFR don't save lives. They're just fancy green numbers on dashboards. Need to focus on where the next injury or the next fatality is going to come from. And I've just realized my time has run out, but I'm going to take an extra couple of minutes, if that's okay, to finish off. If you can spend your time and focus on a key couple of areas, we've told our supply chain internally, we've told our organization, if you're going to focus on a few things, focus on critical control verification, real-time field visibility, and unambiguous accountability at all levels, and that includes the profession. We've stopped patting ourselves on the back. We've had a number of days without an LTI or 2 years without an LTI, especially when you can turn around and say, I've had 6 high consequence near misses. And I think we've all had conversations in the past where you've had a 3-week conversation on a broken finger or a cut finger, and no one's once mentioned the fact you've just rolled over a crane but nobody was injured. And this is the change of the paradigm that we need to focus on, and certainly in the global south. What we've done now is we've stripped out the vanity metrics, and this is a challenge, certainly from a profession. It's nice to show from a health and safety professional that you've got good green dashboards, but the reality is that doesn't help us. It doesn't tell us where the risk is, and it doesn't tell us how to manage it. It's harder for our teams to have hard conversations with management about where performance issues lie in terms of what we're seeing on the ground. For us, we look at a few key things earlier, and it went back to the last presentation. Providing easy access to key information, pictorial images of key risks on 2 or 3 pages. How we distribute that using AI and technology, whether it's WhatsApp, WeChat, Telegram. We can provide it in multi-language, real-time capability to any worker that's got a mobile phone. And what we do know is that everybody has a mobile phone. So frontline accessibility has become absolutely key. We have one simple focus on system health that tells us if the system is working as intended to do so. And we focus on critical risks prior to starting work. So to make sure that all critical risks are checked prior to any activity starting and all those controls are in place. So the rethink for what competency really matters, it's not about certificates, it's not about audit compliance scores, it's not about green metrics, about being a competent leader in 2025. You need to be able to manage cultural complexity, operational ambiguity, financial pressure, and still keep people accountable for making the right calls. We're no longer inspectors or advisors, we're system thinkers, relationship brokers. What we need to do is make sure that we bring clarity to the role, clarity to the organization, and clarity helped with accountability. So just wrapping up, we've got the opportunity now, and it's a privilege to be able to have this focus on health and safety. Thank you very much. Focus on health and safety at the conference. I don't think this should be a side pillar in the future. I think when we get to 2030 in Saudi Arabia, this should be a core focus and a core pillar of the agenda at Riyadh Expo 2030. What I'd like us to say is let's show what real south to east knowledge transfer looks like. There's a lot of knowledge and experience in this room. I think we have the opportunity to do some great sharing, and I think we have the opportunity to make sure that we can lead the forefront of the capability and the growth that's required to support the function and the development of our professional function in the future. And I know I'm well over time, and I'm getting the eyes from the side, so I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you very much for this brilliant presentations. I have two questions. One a little bit a more soft one, and maybe a second one that will be a little bit more provocative. Perfect. The soft one, you mentioned a real-world capability gap. Could you please provide us with an example? For example, you are located in Riyadh from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. What is AWAC, what is AQUA doing to tackle this real-world capability gap?
Yeah, so the capability gap for me is it's not to do with the health and safety framework paradigm. We're not throwing that out of the window. Right? What we're saying is you have a limited amount of time and effort, and not all areas are created equal. So where you spend that time and effort to get the best focus and the results is what we need to do. And right now we're not seeing where you want to spend your time and effort, the right level of thinking and the right level of capability. So there's three ways we're doing this. We built an internal program based on human factors, HOPS engineering and design, which we're upskilling our internal professionals. The second element is partnering with local apprenticeships. So we work with the Energy Institute for Renewable Energy and water. And in fact, we had the privilege of graduating 30 female HSE engineers last year, and they are absolutely fierce, by the way. They will be the next future leaders of the organization. And finally, we work with a few universities in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on their Masters of Health and Safety Engineering, and we help them with real-world experience of what it's like in operating in an organization like ours, such as whether it's front-end engineering design work, feasibility studies, process safety, or critical risk management in construction. So that's typically how we're working on the capability gap. And I'm waiting for your provocative question.
The second question. The decisive factor for you is speed. At the same time, you require the OSH expert to think different, to act different, to focus on what really matters. You explained it very precisely. But to ask you your own question, what's really important? From our perspective, we are aiming at decent work, meaningful work, quality of life. And my question is, why are you accepting in general this factor speed? Are there no limits of acceleration in our modern world?
That's a really, really good question. I think the element of speed is driven by the climate change itself and our ability as an industry to keep up with that change. So the speed is essentially forced upon us when we try and to meet the Paris Agreement and our ability to meet our carbon requirements. But for us, we're working in these emerging economies. People need water. The populations are growing. People need power. It's a basic human right. So we need to get there fast. Now, for us, the way of doing it is we know as a professional organization that we'll go into these areas and it will take us time to get in the right standards, but we have the opportunity to grow the capability within those regions, both the social fabric and the welfare fabric, and both of the work in those parts of the world. So yes, it becomes a challenge, but two, who else is going to do it? And three, if we don't do it, what is going to be the outcome if somebody goes in there with just speed and cost at price? At least we go with speed, cost, social, welfare, and we want to grow the local community. We want to work with the local community and work with the local governments and our DFIs to make sure that we can make long-lasting, sustainable change.
Thank you very much, Simon.
That's a good question.
Thank you very much. The participants that have been our two keynote speakers, but we will not stop now. We will continue with 3 short presentations, each focusing on one of our 3 challenges, core topics: climate change, technological progress, and ethical challenges. In the following, we will have the opportunity, Tim, I think it's your part now, to listen to Tim Tregenza. Duncan introduced him already shortly. He's Senior Network Manager at the European Agency for Safety and Health at Work. He started his career as a labor inspector, very practical, very close to the shop floor in the United Kingdom. Today, Tim is responsible for coordinating the agency's activities, on the one hand with international organizations, and on the other hand, he is very active in collaborating with European networks. Tim, the floor is yours, and he will not treat us with a PowerPoint presentation. He will simply speak. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, before I start, or rather I should say, while I'm talking, I'm very concerned about your posture. Prolonged sitting is a health risk. So if you feel at any point, and I strongly recommend this, stand up and stretch. And I'm not going to be offended if you move while I'm speaking. It really is important. These chairs aren't the greatest, so get up and move whenever you can. Okay, I should first introduce EUOSHA, the European Agency for Safety and Health at Work. We are Europe's health and safety information source. The European Union has 27 member states, from the size of Germany all the way to the size of Malta. And we have a common legal system for prevention. Now, as an information agency, we carry out research and communication in all aspects of health and safety at work. In the past, we've looked at topics such as demographic change and aging workers. At the moment, we're doing an awful lot on climate change, on mental health and psychosocial risks, and in particular, at the moment, on the topic I'm going to talk about, on digitalization. In fact, we're in the middle of a 3-year campaign on digitalization, how it's changing the work in not just Europe, but globally. And I'm going to highlight 2 dimensions to this. The first is how the digitalization of the work environment is changing the world of work. And the second is how this change impacts on occupational safety and health professionals. Now, just before I start, most importantly, we have to realize what is causing harm. And studies globally show that work-related, when we look at all work-related deaths, globally is about 80% of those are health-related. In Europe, that number is virtually 90%. So it's very, very easy for us as health and safety professionals to go safety of this, safety that, and completely forget about all those issues that cause disability affected, loss of health and death, premature death, maybe with long latency illnesses, cancers, things like this that are not normally recognized as occupational injuries. I'm not talking about recognized industrial diseases here. I'm talking about cancers and long-term impacts on your health. So it's health and safety, health first for a reason. Okay, so when we look at the changing work environment due to digitalization, I pick up 4 topic areas here. The first is remote and hybrid working. You know, I divide the world up now to BP and AP, before the pandemic and after the pandemic. And what the pandemic did was drive massively the move to remote and hybrid working. Yeah, how many of us now work from home, at least partly? Yeah, we all, basically we all do, don't we? I do 3 days a week in the office. Okay, how does that affect my ergonomics? How does that affect how the OSH professional manages the health and safety of that worker who may not even come into the office for training for his work? If he's using his ironing board as his workstation at home, which many people do. Yeah, the ironing board's adjustable. It's great as a workbench. If you haven't got a sit-stand desk, use your ironing board. Second topic, the digital platform work. You know, we talk about sometimes the Uberization of work is something people call it. How does this change the work environment? Well, one simple way is that it is redefining what work is, what employment is, who has the employment duties. If I am a former labour inspector, first question is there a work activity? Who is the employer? Yeah, they're the first questions you have to ask, because if it's not work, it may not be covered by the health and safety legislation. And we also have a drive here with the digital platform work. In some cases, there can be psychosocial risks on the worker because we have what we can call black box AI. Why are jobs being allocated to which workers? And we see some cases, and there's some reports that this is not being done equitably, that some workers are being treated differently because of their gender, because of their skin color, for whatever reasons. The third topic I would touch on here is the automation of tasks. And what's important here, it's not just the automation of physical tasks. Yeah, we've all seen the videos of the car factories and the robots doing the painting. That's old news. We're talking about the automation of cognitive tasks. And one of the research reports we did a literature review and said, where's the research going on now? Which sectors is the research on task automation happening now? Do you know what sector? The health and social care sector. It's not about manufacturing, it's about the service sector now. So how is that impacting the workers in those sectors? If your doctor is using AI or working with a robot or a cobot, how is it affecting how that doctor works? And how do you adapt that risk assessment? And the fourth area I'll mention here is the use of artificial intelligence in worker management. Now, last week, I visited a large factory. If you walk through that factory, looking at your mobile phone, cameras are monitoring you, you're picked up on the screen, an alarm goes off and say, stop using your mobile phone. I'm sorry? I can see the benefits of using this surveillance to make sure people are wearing PPE or whatever, but at what cost? How is that data collected? How is that data used? How is that data stored? Who has access to that data? If you're monitoring for health and safety, You're not monitoring for worker performance. Come on, let's use the data properly. Know why you're collecting the data, how you're going to use the data, how you take that data forward, who has access to that data. This is so important. Data privacy is a huge topic in the European Union. It's vital to be transparent when using digital systems and engage with the workers before you put the system in place. Okay, so that's a very quick spin through 4 topic areas relating to how the changing world of work is changing due to digitalization. So what does this mean for the profession? What does it mean for the OSH professional? So the first thing is you are getting a lot more data instantaneously. How much data can you actually process? Now, the factory I was in last week, they had a control center that had 1 million data points coming in. That's great. You can spot instantly a problem. I have to say the human factors, the design of the work of the control room made me a little nervous. I would not like a dozen different alarms going off in there. Yeah, how do you manage that level of information coming in instantaneously in a crisis situation? So you are going to have, as an OSH professional, much more data, much quicker than it used to. How long did it used to take to get an accident report? A week? It gets mailed in from your outstation and it comes into the factory. As a labour inspectorate, it used to be you had reporting times so many days, even sometimes weeks, to report an accident. Now you get it instantaneous virtually by WhatsApp. Second way the digitalization is changing profession, you are getting these tools to help you. And these tools are really important to help you because you, as I say, you can't manage without the tools now. But always the question in the back of your mind is like, how was this tool developed? How does this tool learn? Yeah, am I giving the right picture? Am I giving the whole picture by this tool I'm using? And the third way I would highlight here is that we have the benefit now of metadata. And this is something that labour inspectorates are getting very, very excited about. You can get in massive data sources and then program your inspection using that source, so you're using maximum resource of the labour inspectors. They're going to the high-risk companies, traditionally, and picking out hazards and risks that may not have previously been seen, such as psychosocial risks. So we're seeing a lot of change. What I would stress about digitalization is not the tool. It's not the digital change that's the issue. It's how you use this tool, how you address it. And you've got to be transparent in what you do. You've got to plan from the start. You've got to also think about how are things learning? How are we learning as individuals? How are we processing things? But also, if we're using software, if we're using AI, how is that learning? So that, have I kept the time? That was a pretty rapid, I appreciate, spin through the topic, and I'll be delighted to take questions or later to chat with you about anything more specific. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim. Exciting as always. 2 questions. In our workshop, we are dealing with issues around competence and capability. And I'm always asking myself, what's digital literacy? What do we mean about being technology and data literate? Please, can you give us an answer?
I'm tempted to say, well, the first start is actually, can you use the device? I mean, as an older person, as a senior, as an official senior, yeah, I still have to ask my children how to turn the TV on. So the first thing is, can we use the technology itself ourselves? The second thing is being aware of the digital world and being aware of the data. and that we have to manage data. We have to know how is it collected, why is it collected, where is it stored, how is it used, who has access to it. We need to know about the data, because when we know about the data, we can use the data correctly and effectively. And there are limitations to that, and we're not misusing the data. For me, that is a core aspect of digital literacy.
That's a very user-oriented answer, very tool-oriented. We have to control, we have to manage the tools, we have to evaluate the tools. But you mentioned it also, is the issue, for example, of artificial intelligence not going deeper. We are speaking about cognitive functions, and not only cognitive, but also our relationships are substituted by AI-based tools. And what do you think? In the end, will the human mind be somehow redundant?
One of our key messages from our digitalization campaign is that we have to have a human-centered approach. That's it. The technology, the digitalization, the AI is for the benefit of humans. It's not for the benefit of technology. So we have to remain the focus, the center of the technology, of the knowledge, of the digitalization. And that is key. If you don't bring a system in for the sake of bringing a system in, you say, okay, we want to achieve this, which in our profession is to make the workplaces safer and healthier. Let's see how this works. Let's see how we do this, and we go forward from the commissioning, from the inception, all the way through to the implementation and review. And there is a human-led, human-centric approach to that.
Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you.
And so we move on to our next speaker. I have the great honor of introducing Ahmad Ismael. He is the president of the Malaysian Society for Occupational Safety and Health, an organization that began in 1971 and was actually key in its partnership in helping their government to develop Malaysia's Occupational Safety and Health Act in 1974. And of course, he also represents a POSHO here as well, I believe. So he leads his organization in its mission to enhance and promote occupational safety health in all workplaces and in all industries. This includes developing leadership, competency, and capability amongst its members. Ahmad is going to talk to us about the emerging competency needs and development pathways. So thank you, Ahmad.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, moderators, for a good... All right, so I'm Ahmad from MSOSH, Malaysian Society for Occupational Safety and Health. Like Duncan said, we have been in Malaysia since 1971. So this is actually our 54th years in Malaysia. That one, the development of MSOSH actually based on Factory and Machinery Act 1969. So that was the first act came out in Malaysia, and we changed our name from Malaysian Industries Association to Malaysian Society for Occupational Safety and Health, with the introduction of OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health, 1994 in Malaysia. So a new regulation actually is focusing more on the development of human-based understanding on the implementation of OSHA. And as you know, Malaysian government, we are enforcing OSHA based on self-regulation. I will explain later. At the moment, we are having more than 5,000 members in Malaysia, and we collaborate with all agencies in Malaysia, and it depends on more understanding of all parties in Malaysia. So basically, the implementation or the enforcement of OSHA 1994 based on self-regulation, which rely more on the understanding of OSHA from the employer and also the employees, compared to the understanding from the government, because our government is not really enforcing the regulation. It is more on educating our employer and employees on how the importance of OSH in Malaysia. And MSHOSH, as one of the biggest association in Malaysia, we play our part as a mediator among practitioners, among employers, and also the government. So it is not easy actually for our members to become the advisors for the employers, because we have to understand the behavior of our employers, the behavior of employees, and to achieve what we need in OSHA 1994. And our target is normally we put under zero accident. We collaborate with our government to achieve that target. So started in 1998, we introduced a new act, Occupational Safety and Health Act, and we have to understand more on behavioral change among our employees and our employers, how to implement OSHA on them. So before this, under the Factory and Machinery Act, we are focusing more on machine behavior. So our trust is when the machine is in good condition, when the machine is safe, then people will save. That is our previous trust before the coming of Occupational Safety and Health, 1994. So we have to change our belief that human will play a major role of introducing of accident, and also we have to control human to prevent the accident from happening in our country. So start from that. We have to understand about human, and we also have to understand about the climate change of the world. Next. Can I control here? Okay, I can control here. All right. So the concept of the regulation put us safety and health officer. In Malaysia, we started in 1998. We have a safety and health officer, and most of them is our members. So we have to become the advisors, we have to become the frontliners, and we also have to become mediators between our government, between the agencies, and also the business owners. So we have to mediate all the needs of the regulation and also the purpose of business owners, where they are getting a profit from their business. At the same time, we have to put an education to them that while you are chasing for a profit, OSH also must be put. That's why in the previous time, we can see a lot of word safety first in Malaysia. So safety first means you have to put your safety first before you run the business. And now we are changing. Safety is not the first in your business, but safety is a must during your operation, during your business, and whatever you do, safety is a must. Even it is not the first choice in your business, right? So based on all the changes, we need to develop the skills of our safety and health officers. We need to understand the machine. We need to improve our skill among our safety and health officer. So this is the frontliners and also the mediators that we have. So in Malaysia at the moment we have 5,500 competent person. We call it competent person under our regulation, and they are the one who are daily job to advise the management to understand the importance of OSH. So why you have to fulfill this regulation. And now what we are trying to change is before this we use a lot of regulation. We push a pressure to the government, we push the pressure to the employers that if you fail to obey all the regulation, that you can get a penalty of 50,000 or 500,000. So it seems like it's not work in Malaysia, right? Because all the employers, they are not afraid of the regulation, right? So maybe we can say that if you punish me 50,000, I can pay. If you punish me 500,000, no problem, I will pay double. So that's the the concept that we have in Malaysia. So that's why now we are focusing on another side of the employers, that we say that OSH actually can bring a good benefit to your business. If now your profit you can get 1 million by implementing OSH, next year you should get 1.5 million of profit. So this is what we try to change our approach on our employers. It the same goes to our employees, because our employee, every year we have accident more than 50,000 cases in Malaysia. So, but we are trying to influence the employees that if you involve in any accident, it is not only involve yourself, it will involve your family, it will involve your sons, your daughter, and blah, blah, blah. So this is some kind of education, some kind of skills that we are improving towards our frontliners, which is safety and health officer. So other than that, we are also improving their skills in terms of influencing people from top to the bottom, and including the understanding of AI system. So we need the AI. All right. So what we did now is safety and health officer in Malaysia. Before this, we are governed by our government, and our position is stated in the regulation. So certain companies, you need to employ a safety and health officer, blah, blah, blah. And from time to time, we believe there are changes of technologies, there are changes of behaviors of human, and there are changes of climate change. So we are also changing the recognition and the acceptance of our frontliners, which is safety and health officer, among our businessmen in Malaysia, employers, employees, and also our government. So that's why we are exploring a new opportunity by introducing a professional term, a professional title for our safety and health officer. So for your information, at the moment, safety and health officer in Malaysia is under the category of safety and health practitioner. All right? So we only recognize as a practitioner only, and we are moving upwards, like Mr. Tim said just now, we are moving towards safety and health professional. So that's not easy. There's a lot of challenges, there are a lot of barriers we need to penetrate. Like in Malaysia, if you want to get a recognition from our government to become a professional, you need to penetrate our parliaments. So we need to meet our minister, we need to penetrate our ministries, and OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health, is an activity that will across all our ministries in Malaysia, not only one minister. All right, so like ours, Occupational Safety and Health, we have been put under the Minister of Labour and Industry. So, but all the activities will go across, including all the women ministry, including all the education ministries, and we are moving towards that to get the recognition from our ministries. So that's why currently we are exploring a new knowledge, a new skill, and most importantly, the new recognition from our industries, and most importantly is our government. Other than that, what we are doing now is we are introducing the post nominal title for our professional recognized by MCHOI. So I believe the post nominal is well received in certain countries. Like last year when I went to UK, they have a lot of post nominal title, and it's well received by the industries compared to Malaysia. So in Malaysia, we are well received of pre-nominal, like engineers, like architects, they have a pre-nominal title in front of their name, IR, AR, even the latest one, we have a technologies. So that is what we are working towards on. We are looking on the development of Malaysian board of OSH. But like I said, we have to penetrate our parliament. We have a lot of barriers that we need to penetrate before we can get that. So I believe it might be done in 5 to 10 years, start from now. Okay, so as a start, now we are introducing Malaysian professional scheme called Safety and Health Professional, recognized by MSHOSH, and verbally we get a recognition from our minister, and soon to be we'll get a letter from them. So the challenge of changing from practitioners to professional, we need to concentrate, we need to work on it for the next 5 to 10 years, and hopefully we can get. So all of this actually we did to make sure that our practitioners in Malaysia, to make sure that our professional in Malaysia can, what we call it, we can get a new knowledge to face a new culture of business, to face a new culture of human behavior, and the latest one to change, to face the changes of our climate in the world. All right, so I believe this is my share about our development of OSH practitioner in Malaysia, and I open for question, I think, from the moderators. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. You left me there reflecting a little bit on one of the themes that seems to be coming out at the moment, and that's about speed. You know, and I was left reflecting for a second that in the United Kingdom, in my own country, it took us nearly 300 years to evolve our legislation to the point where we were, keeping everybody safe in the workplace. And then you describe a pathway of only 30 years to get to a similar point. So, that's I think, a real reflection of where we are in the world at the moment, in terms of the speed that's needed for us to be able to respond. I'm intrigued on how MSOSH actually has an influence in the profession and an influence with the government around not just the competency, the baseline competency needed for a health and safety practitioner or professional, but what is also needed for the future and what is also needed for them to continue their professional development. Can you talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on that, please?
Okay, thank you. So actually in Malaysia, the implementation of OSH is rely on the three party: government, employers and employee, and employer and employee. So MSHOSH, we represent all of them. So we sit in the middle of three of them: the government, the employer and employees. So that is the importance of the knowledge and the competency that we need to have. So that's why we are talking about the government. Government is recognizing MSHOSH as part of their development programs of OSH in Malaysia. So any new programs, any new modules, we will involve in putting and inputs to them. What is the needs of the government? What's the needs of the practitioners, and also what's the needs of the employers? So when the employer also, they are developing a new modules of a program for their members. They are also recognizing MSHOSH as part of their consultant to guide them on how to fulfill all the requirement and how to follow all the legislation that we have in Malaysia. And at this moment, we are also getting a recognition from our education ministry, where we are developing a new what we call it, a new degree programs, master program and PhD program in our higher institution. So because we believe that at the moment, most of our safety and health officer, most of our practitioners, they do not have a higher education level at this moment. So we have, but not many. So we are collaborating with our Ministry of Education to develop a new modules so that in the future we can have a lot of high education safety practitioners in Malaysia to become a mediator in between of these three bodies: the government, employer, and also employees.
Thank you. And do you think there will become a point where your government will actually legislate that,
yes,
that occupational safety and health practitioners must continue their development after their basic
we are pushing on
qualification?
that too. Yes, we went to the parliament, we met our minister, and even we met our prime minister on this, that when we are saying that the architects is very important on development of structures, all right? Engineers is very important to develop what they need to do. And we are pushing hard towards our government said that health and safety is one of the most important factors in developing Malaysia towards a new development country in the future.
Thank
Right?
you. That was fascinating. Thank you, Ahmed. Please show your appreciation. And so to our final speaker, Evelien Jonkeren. Evelien is the treasurer of the International Social Security Association section on prevention in transportation. Evelien is a strong believer in the benefits of international cooperation with a track record of delivering cross-border networking, international cooperation structures, and intercultural competence. Evelien is going to talk about ethical considerations associated with migration, that's economic migration of workers, and recognizing cultural diversity. So, Evelien, thank you.
Thank you, Duncan, for the kind introduction. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here. It's a great honor for me. Yes, I have a presentation as well. I represent the ISA section on prevention in transportation, and we have a big network exchanging knowledge on prevention in transportation. And one of the things we do is organize symposia and events, and we had a special event on cultural diversity and what that means for occupational safety and health. So it inspired me to get the message across with a little story. It's a fictional story, it's an illustration, so don't pin me down on any technical details. But I think the story always gets across. I'd like to bind all the things that we've said in this workshop up until now a little bit together. So I'd like you to meet my well-respected fictional AI friend, Jamal. He's from Egypt. 7 years ago, he came to Belgium and works as a truck driver for a global freight company. Last year, he was working during a heat wave, and when he started his ride, everything was fine. So the engine was working fine. He was taking his brakes according to this, the rules, and everything was going smoothly. But after a while, he felt very tired because the air conditioning was breaking down. It was getting hotter and hotter, and he felt like he was going to faint. So he called his supervisor. Can I take an extra out of the ordinary break? I need that. It feels like the air conditioning is breaking down. And the supervisor said, well, the telemetrics is showing me everything is fine. All the lights are green, and we need you to keep the schedule and keep on driving. And you already had a break a couple of minutes ago. So long story short, Jamal just kept on driving. And after a while, it was getting too hot in his cabin, and he collapsed, and resulting in a big accident. There's a lot of elements here that come together. A lot of the things that we already talked about: climate change, climate shocks straining our system, AI and telemetrics transforming how we manage and monitor work, and migration adding a new cultural layer to every workplace. So, and these forces, they move faster. We already talked about speed today. They move faster than our policies and laws. They move faster than our training and technical solutions, and sometimes even faster than our ability to reflect. So we've already heard a lot of presentations on technology and environmental changes. I'd like to bind the two together and show you how ethics can be not a third element, but something that can help us dealing with these changes. Because when technological development can feel like weed growing, out of control, and we don't know how to keep the bush in shape, then ethics can be the scissors keeping the bush in shape. And if environmental change can feel like life is slipping through our hands, and the drought and the heat is burning the bush, then ethics can be the can of water replenishing the soil. When rules and regulations are developing too slow in order to keep up with the pace of change, ethical reflection steps in to help us deal with new realities. Just so that we're all on the same page with what we're talking about, a little bit about definition. Values, morals, ethics, we tend to, use all these words in the same context, but just so that we're all talking about the same thing. Values build my foundational compass, indicating what is important to me. I'll show an example of what I mean in the next slide. On top of that, morality is acting according to that compass. And ethics is the critical review of my compass and my actions. An example, a situation, a company publishes a sustainability report. The values at stake are transparency and responsibility. The morality is honest behavior towards stakeholders, and ethics is the reflection on the social responsibilities of companies. I have a couple of examples more, but for the sake of time, I'm going over them really quickly. It's just important to separate what we're talking about when we're talking about values, morality, ethics. Now, in today's workplaces, we're dealing with another layer, an extra layer, like the different cultural backgrounds. They, depending on the cultural background and the differing values that people bring to the table, people have a different way of collaborating, a different way of expressing themselves. And here you see some examples of how that works out. And what this means is that people with different cultural backgrounds and norms and values have different assumptions about risk. They have different way of dealing with authority. They have a different tendency to either or not speak up, like Jamal did. So Jamal's experience wasn't just about heat. It wasn't just about failing technology. It was about being part of a system where his cultural background shaped his choices. In this case, the choice not to confront his supervisor, not speaking up, and there was nobody there to bridge that gap, to tell him it's all right. When rules and rigid procedures fall short, we should be able to rely on human compassion or common sense. When the only values that count are always stick to the schedule or trusting the telemetric information more than what your worker is saying, then accidents will continue to happen. So, things to consider when integrating ethics into our OSH practice. We can't rely on rules alone. We need to build ethical reflection into every decision. And what does that mean? It means continuously reflecting on and adjusting our compass. It means we need that compass to point us towards decisions that honor human dignity and safety. Change demands more than technical or regulative fixes. They demand ethical clarity. Change has always been and always will be a part of life, but at this point, things are moving so fast. We've talked about that in a couple of presentations. And coming up with rules and procedures or technical solutions takes time. And in order to bridge that time gap, we need the clarity of our ethical standards to guide us through this unknown territory. An important question in this is, who should lead that ethical discussion, the reflection? In my personal view, I think it's all of us, not really leading it, but contributing to it. Everybody brings something to the table. OSH professionals can serve as catalysts for reflection. But we need, of course, the managers, the CEOs, the company leaders, in order to initiate the discussion, to incentivize communication, and their willingness to ask and answer difficult questions. We need policymakers and lawmakers who are willing to embed values into workable regulations. And we need workers' representatives who are empowered to speak truth to power. It's a collective endeavor. Ethical reflection is core to how we shape safe work in a changing world. It's not just something to put last. It's not something that's nice to have, an add-on. It should come first. So I'd like to leave you with 4 ideas on actionable steps that we can make maybe start with today or discuss here in the workshop. It's not it's just a random order, so it's not a priority. Always ask the ethical question in every decision, not just can we or must we, but also should we. Create space for cross-cultural dialogue about safety and risk. Because, and I think James said that, diversity has the potential to help shape safety. I hope I'm quoting you right. I thought that was a nice quote. We need to take everybody on board. When we have a different cultural background, when we have different values, not everything is self-explanatory. We come from a different idea about what is self-explanatory. I mean, like German punctuality is, how to deal with time is different than in other countries. How you if you're trying to be on time. So we need to get everybody on board so that everybody understands what we're talking about, and don't assume anything is self-explanatory. We need to go for full transparency when introducing new technologies or climate-induced measures. This is also about dialogue and openness. Again, it's about including everyone and sharing the trade-offs openly. And I think this is a very important one, make ethical reflection a capability. It's something you practice and build in yourself and in others. And with that, we can design the smartest systems and draft the best rules possible, but without the courage to ask ethical questions, we'll still leave people like Jamal behind. We can't code or regulate our way to safety. Without the capacity to make ethical judgments and decisions, every tool falls short. The future of safe work depends on how we are able to lead with ethics, today, tomorrow, and every decision thereafter. And with that, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Evelien. So I'm intrigued by what you were saying there about the structures of organizations. And in my experience of working with, in particular, large corporations, you quite often have a different view about the company at different levels of the organization. So the hierarchy has a vision and they want to go somewhere, and they set the sort of the loose values for everybody to tie into. But the interpretation of that can be different at middle management, and again at more junior management, and again at the shop floor. So there is a question there about what kind of ethical discussions are needed and what kind of ethical decisions are needed, and whereabouts within that kind of structure. Do you have any views on that?
Well, I think the kind of discussions that you need in the beginning are about trust and openness, and about what would it mean if I participate in this discussion? What would it have consequences if I open up, if I say something that I believe in honestly, but might be contradictory to the company's vision? Or maybe, yeah, I think trust is a very good place to start. Well, something to build in the beginning, because people are usually not confident in opening up within in a structure. So and from then on, go through all the layers and keep talking about stuff. And it's not just done with one discussion or one seminar or one presentation. It's a continuous communication, in my view.
Thank you. So one of the other things that I'm also intrigued with is how far organizations actually understand ethics. You know, you talk about ethics, and there's often a puzzled look coming back in your direction. And they say, well, isn't that something which academics do at universities? Right. They think about the ethics of this, that, and the other. So there is a kind of a prejudice even towards ethics. So have you come across that in your discussions around some of these with the companies that you've talked to in the past? And have you got any tips about how you might broach that subject with somebody who might be a little reticent to engage?
Yeah, well, ethics might be too big of a word to start with, and what most companies do recognize or as something to talk about is values. So start talking about values and define your compass, like define what's important to you and define what you want to steer on. So maybe, I don't know if that implies avoiding the word ethics, but I think values is usually something that, because that could also be commercial value or whatever, you know, innovation value, and so that we can, you know, build in other values as well. So that could be an opener. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So please show your appreciation.
It will be your turn now, but in between we would like to prepare something on the tables. You can be excited in advance. Therefore, we will have a break now until 5 minutes before 12. And please relax a little bit, refresh yourself a little bit, and be back here 5 minutes before 12. And then we will continue, and this will be your chance and part then. The speakers as well. The speakers as well. Chris, would you like to join us as well? What are we going to do in the second part of the workshop? In the second part, we will work together on a competence plateau with further requirements, necessary competencies, capabilities, and potential gaps in relation to natural, technical, and social changes and challenges. That means we put it there. The global changes, again, will be our core issue, the impact on OSHA experts and workers, and required competences, capabilities, but also their gaps. You will find on your table sheets of paper and questions, most of them formulated by Duncan. And we are seeking now your opinions, ideas, and comments on the influence of global change on individual capability at work. The trick here, or the task, is that you will write down your opinions, ideas, and comments on the influence of these global changes. And you will change the table for 2 times. You can stick together in the group. 2 people of you would be excellent. Therefore, here is 1 table left. 3 people, 1 person would be not so good, but it's possible as well. You will discuss and you will write down your ideas, comments, and visions and advices on these papers. And then we will, after 10 minutes, change. And you will go to another table and whoops, you will see what your colleagues have already produced. This may inspire you. You may connect to it, or you may say, oh no, this I do not like, and you will write anything else. Therefore, Chris is very excited to collect all your comments, ideas, advices afterwards, to bring it with him to the plenary of the World Assembly on Friday. And there is a roadmap for the World Assembly for the future. And maybe he will be able to include your inspiration, your ideas into the roadmap for the World Assembly until 2030 as well. Therefore, be courageous and not too shy, and be creative, make an effort, and you will have a direct influence on the World Assembly. Please, start. We would like to come to an end now. And In particular, we would like to ask the speakers again to slip back into their speaker's role. Oh, teacher? I'm not a teacher. No, no, no. Well, I hate this. Thank you very much. Our speakers, please give one final insight or give a comment on the communication on the tables. It's up to you. Tim Tregenza, don't go away. Your final insight from this session or from the communication on the table.
Okay, thank you very much. I think my insight here would be that the changing world of work, both climate change, but also digitalization, but also the demographic shift, means that OSH professionals have to be much more aware of the management of psychosocial risks and risk factors that exist. Whether this comes from cyberbullying, whether this is work-related stress through over-monitoring of the worker, or through other factors like concern over climate change, we as OSH professionals have to be looking how this can be mitigated, how this can be managed, and the risks to the workers minimized.
Evelien, your statement, please. Insight, comment, whatever.
Well, I'm very happy with the open discussion and the topics that came up, and the inspiration, then the exchange and openness, and how ethics is more of an issue than I thought. I thought, well, technologically, okay, digitalization, yeah, it's on everybody's radar, and climate change, obviously, too, but ethics, I don't know. Maybe that's woo-woo stuff for for engineers and so I was but I'm happy surprised that it isn't a topic. So thank you for all the contributions. I was very touched by the Canadian example of how ethics is for the engineers a very big issue. Thank you for bringing that up, and learned a lot. So I don't know if that's what you were looking for from my
We
from
will
my
all
side.
keep this in mind. Ethics are not voodoo stuff. That's great. That's great. Simon, is he still here? No, he had to go. He meets a senior person from Saudi Arabia. Exactly. James, here.
Well, thank you, everybody. I really enjoyed the discussion like everybody else. I think for me, it's challenging our approach, and particularly taking a more interdisciplinary approach, I think would be key. I mean, every discussion we were having, whether it is ethics or the need to develop different skill sets, because the world is becoming less predictable. And safety is based on the idea of prediction, risk assessment, and identification. And so the idea of actually, yes, we need to predict as much as we can, but actually, do we need to tilt more to have a more ability to respond, so we more have a greater degree of agility? In high hazard sectors, they have tried to do this, and they now move to better response to say we can't predict every scenario. So we then use simulators to build up muscle memory. So the idea of interdisciplinary, bringing other disciplines and learning from other sectors, I think would be key for me.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted because focusing on how to respond, we have a session on Saturday about resonance. I think it's a coming trend to look for the relationships of how to respond to the world, to the challenges, to each other, to ourselves. And last but not least, Ahmad Ismael.
Thank you. So I think we have a very good discussion today, and based On this, I might conclude our discussion that the climate change already happened, and we have to move along with all the changes. And for my task in Malaysia, I need to upgrade our practitioner to become professional. And after that, we have to ensure that all our professional must go beyond the technical barriers that we have in the world now. And I believe OSH practitioners, OSH professional can ensure their voice is well respected and being recognized healthy and towards our sustainable industry after this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That can go, Chris, one per one into your summary and your delivery for the World Assembly.
Thank you very much. I feel like I've got the unenviable task of summarizing the last 3 hours in 10 minutes. But I have a page full of notes and some more in addition as well. So let me try and find some common trends, common ideas that have come out over the last 3 hours. Can I just start, first of all, by thanking people for kind of engaging in discussion so meaningfully, so honestly. What it's left me with is what I would call a good headache to have. So for me, if I just go through kind of the key points, some of the challenges that we've picked up, I want to be a little bit more proactive here and think about what good work is already happening out there, and then try at some very, very kind of early recommendations as per the rapporteur's template that I'm trying to follow. It may take a little bit more time to reflect on this more fully. In terms of the things that we've spoken about, I would say we've started by really talking about complexity, about the complexity of the world, about the complexity of work, and about the complexity of the profession within that. So if you think over the course of the last 3 hours, we've covered climate change, technological transformation, we've talked about societal change, we've talked about cultural diversity, we've talked about migration, generational difference, and so on and so forth. We've talked about the way that then filters down to the world of work. I've heard some phrases along the way. Tim, I think it may have been you, talked about the Uberization of the workforce. We've talked about different employment arrangements. We've talked about complexity and difficulty across supply chains, the supply of labor and the supply of goods. And obviously you then trace that down to the profession itself. And actually what we've called for throughout the last 3 hours is for OSH professionals and OSH practitioners to have clarity about their role, a need to move with the times, a need to fine-tune all sorts of different technical competencies, behavioral competencies, and so on. And most importantly, I think what we have expressed the need for is for those professionals and practitioners not to lose sight of the basics, to cut through a lot of that complexity and look at something that's very simple and say, okay, well, what is actually happening? Where are our issues? And I think that's one of the key challenges here, that we've talked about such a vast landscape of different factors, and yet we're actually calling for something that is very simple in many ways. And Evelien, I'd look to you and your presentation, which has stuck with me, and I would say that everybody around the room today would remember the name and the story that Evelien mentioned earlier on. It's a fictional story, but it stays with us, and I think that's really, I feel like that's a really important thing to keep hold of here. We also talked, basically next to every note I've made, I've put times by speed, and I think that was a really important reflection from Simon. I know who fittingly has had to speed off, but I think if you reflect on some of those themes and the fact that in each one of those you apply the lens of speed and say, okay, so not only do we need to do that, but we need to do that quickly. It changes the sort of the dynamic there. So in terms of actual challenges that we've talked about today, yes, there is that speed. There's also a question of volume. Okay, the volume of challenges, and actually one of the ways that I think that is probably most visible or most tangible is in the way that we've talked about the amount of information that we have to navigate here. So we've talked about digitalization, and we've talked about the fact that, yes, you may have somebody whose reflection was it being sort of sat in the control room with all of these data points coming in, and having to find simplicity from that. So it is about speed, but it's also about volume as well. I've got a question about whether the profession is set up in such a way that it helps us at the current moment respond to some of the issues that we've talked about. And again, forgive me, my referencing in this is a bit of a mess, so I might be attributing things to the wrong person. But somebody, I think, Tim, again, I think it may have been you, who talked about the fact that, you know, overwhelmingly, the issues that we're facing are health related. And yet, are our profession set up in such a way to respond to those? Arguably not. But again, how do you get there? Ahmad, you talked about a challenge around the credibility of the profession, and the fact that development and evolution from a practitioner to a professional is something that goes much wider than professional bodies like the one that I'm here kind of representing this week. It's something that, as you said, it touches on the relationships and the influence that we have over governments and businesses themselves. So there's a big challenge around that. And then returning again to this idea of ethics, and the fact that I would hold that up as being a really important takeaway from the whole session here, that kind of either goes across the top or underpins, however we want to see it. It's one thing saying it, but I think the sort of mixed esteem in which the ethics is held, or maybe the lack of understanding, maybe that's a better way of putting it, but that lack of understanding at the moment is something of a blocker in terms of the development of ethical skills. You know, it isn't something that is learned in a half-an-hour course. It's something that we have to become much more intuitive in our usage of. So, more hopeful reflections on the session. What is currently happening out there? We've talked about how research into things like automation has started to pivot more to where we are going. We've had reflections on the fact that we're looking much more at automation in things like health and social care, not just in terms of manufacturing. We've talked about how many tools there are available, really easily accessible out there. Obviously, this comes with another challenge around, you know, at what cost. We've talked about the example of the factory with the monitoring in place that is just the kind of vision monitoring and pings to let somebody know that they're not holding onto the handrail, or they've got their phone out. Again, the ethical dimension of some of those sorts of things we're yet to navigate. But we have these tools at our disposal that can have huge benefits for the safety and health of workers. It is just a case of finding ways to move towards responsible innovation. And again, we've come back to things that I think have been said for decades, probably longer, way before my time, about the fact that safety and health needs to be implemented into discussions early in the piece. Somebody had on one of their slides all of the different points along that, I think it may have been Simon, all of the different points along that kind of procurement process and right the way down to execution, where safety and health needs to be included in that. Again, think about that times by speed. So in terms of a couple of very early recommendations, and I'm sure that I will have missed things here, I'm sure that there'll be many more to come, but we've talked about how we need to find a way to put human-centeredness into action, okay? Because again, it's become one of those buzz terms that people may use, you know, human-centered organizations and so on and so forth. How do you actually do that in practice? For me, I'll come back to that, the story of Jamal again. You know, this kind of starting point for anything. Actually, how do you cut through a lot of the complexity? Well, you start with the person, and rather than thinking about all of those different factors that are at play, you start with the person and you scale out from there. There is, I think that there has been a real sense that those technical skills and soft skills that safety and health practitioners, professionals need to continue to be fine-tuned. Just as a side point, Duncan and I both worked on a focus group series around our competency framework. Some people in the room who were part of that process. And one of the outcomes from that was the fact that competency frameworks are fit for purpose. They probably just need to be a little bit more flexible. So a lot of the skills that people have, they will continue to have. But again, How do you use them in times that are uncertain? How do you use them in times that are moving at such a pace? And then I think that there is a recommendation here about focusing on issues that are most important. And I think that's a big sort of emphasis here for our professionals. How do we, amidst all of these different kind of changes and factors that we're trying to take into consideration, how do we, and this is not a rhetorical question, how do OSH professionals focus on what is most important? Maybe even just at the level of the resources that they have available and the time that they have available. Do they have the means in their roles to stop and to think about what is most important, where the issues are, and respond to that? And I think that will come down to not only individual capability of professionals themselves, but the structures in which they work, the organization of the profession itself. So wrapping up, conscious of time, I would just say this. We have, over the course of 3 hours, described huge complexity. And yet we've called for something really simple at the end of it. And I feel like that's a really nice kind of way of tying up some of the things that we've said here. So yes, we've talked about climate change, talked about tech transformation, talked about migration, talked about ethics, talked about all sorts of things. But actually we've ended up with something that's quite simple in terms of what we're calling for. Now, obviously, this is a question that will be considered in the context of the roadmap. Again, I've got to take this away and take all of these big sheets away back to my hotel room and pin them up on the wall. So for the next couple of days and put something together. I think I get 3 minutes on Thursday to present back. So at some point, I'm going to have to do it for like a 10-second video for TikTok or something. I don't know. But either way, yes, it is a question for the roadmap. It's a question for saying, okay, we've talked about these things. What sort of actions come out of this? And yes, it will go into that roadmap. But I think it is also, these are more kind of existential questions for us within the room as, as professionals or as experts to think about more broadly, what kind of changes do we need to see in our profession, and whether the architecture of our profession is set up in such a way that will allow us to navigate some of these challenges and face them head on. And I don't know whether I'm to time, but I'm going to stop at that point. Thanks.
Chris and I have this joke where I say to him, I pay you to think, and now you see why, don't you? He's a brilliant man. So it just remains for Ulrike and I to thank all of our speakers once again. Round of applause for our speakers, please. And to thank each and every one of you for participating in the workshop so actively. There is a wealth of information here that we're going to take away with us and make something of. So you can expect from IOSH that in all of the workshops, actually, not just this one, but all of them that we're involved with, we will be doing certainly some follow-up publications to talk about some of the things that have come out today. So watch this space, as they say. Ulrike, do you have a final word?
Enjoy the conference. Join our ENETOSH session on Saturday, 4 until 6 o'clock. It's incredible this time. We will deal with how do young people cope with crisis? What's about their resilience? What's the role of self-efficacy and resonance? And it will be very interesting because we have a world acknowledged famous speaker, Hartmut Rosa there, and other people who are famous, who have something to let us know and to provoke OSH people to think different, to act different. And I hope to see you again on Saturday afternoon, and I wish you a successful conference and a lot of enlightenments. Thank you.